And don't let it stop you. It might bite you, but don't let it stop you. It might try to hurt you, but just don't let it stop you. Just shake it off. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have a grace will lead me.
Steer by the Spirit, not by your senses. And it's so easy to steer by your senses because we're trained to walk by what we see. God will warn you, but he will never create worry within you. When God warns you, he'll give you a specific instruction and it'll mobilize you and make you stronger. When the enemy threatens you, he won't make you stronger, he'll make your faith weaker. I need to tell you that when you ignore God's warnings, you will always suffer loss. Your life is being steered by something. And if you steer your life by your senses, you'll end up in trouble. But your feelings can't forecast the future. Only God's Spirit can. And so you got to learn how to steer by the Spirit. Fix your focus and keep up your courage. The ship's going down, but keep your courage up. How do you keep your courage up when the ship's going down? It's the essence of faith. My life, my faith, my hope is not in my circumstance. My hope is not in this boat. My hope is in my God. And he didn't promise me that he would save the boat. He didn't promise me that I would never cry. He promised me when I did, he'd dry every tear from my eye. He didn't promise me I'd never hurt. He said, when you do hurt, you can lift your eyes to the hills from whence cometh your help. Your help cometh from the Lord. My hope is not in this boat. If the boat goes down, my faith is in God. See, the boat might break. The relationship might not turn out like you want it to. And if your hope is in that boat, my friend, your faith won't make it. I remember in 2012, when my dad first started, I'm going to be delicate how I say this. I believe that my dad, when he was diagnosed with ALS, I believe he lost his mind from a combination of the pain of the disease, some of the medications that he was on, and just the fear of the whole process. The disease itself wasn't affecting his mind, but I believe that something happened to him for a period of about 10 months. The most difficult challenge our family's ever been through. He left us and he went to go live by himself, and when he first did, he was so despondent, we all knew he was suicidal, and he had said as much. And when he left, and there was nothing I could do to get him to stay, and there was nothing I could do to bring him back. And sometimes you've just done all that you can do. You've thrown all the cargo off the ship, you've thrown all the tackle off the ship, you've thrown all the stuff off, and that beating keeps coming. And I was contemplating the fact my dad could very well kill himself, and what was a good relationship with him will end with him being by himself, and there's nothing any of us can do about it. And one night in particular, the fear became so strong in my own heart that would happen, and I wrote about this in the book, but I didn't name the situation, and now I'm telling you the situation behind the story. I remember that the thoughts were coming. So sometimes you can't solve your own problems within your own mind. You got to get outside of yourself and let somebody else talk to you about it. And I called this counselor that I knew of that I had never talked to before. And I said, you deal with high pressure situations all the time. I think my dad may very well kill himself tonight or tomorrow. And you know all the things that start happening in your mind when you're facing a desperate situation. And fear's greatest hit is called what if. What if, 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 and it'll lead you down all these paths, all these problems, all these predicaments. And I was telling the counselor, I'm afraid he's going to kill himself. And I expected him to say, he's not going to do that. Just calm down, be rational. But what he did instead was one of the greatest gifts anybody's ever given me. It was a gift of perspective, and I've never forgotten it. He said, Stephen, what if he does? What if he does? He may. We hope he won't. We pray that he won't. But what if he does? And I said, that would be the hardest thing that I've ever gone through. It would be terrible. And he said, right, it would be a nightmare. It'd be a living hell. You would never be the same. It would wreck you. But, he said, would God get you through it? This is where fear either takes over our life or we push back against it and realize that, catch this phrase, even if the worst case scenario plays out, God will be there when the boat breaks. And I used to think that fighting fear was all about pushing it back. That's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. Just I need to be more optimistic. And I do think it's important that we don't walk around all the time playing out the worst possible scenarios in our head, because most of the things we worry about never even happen. I like how Joyce Meyer says it. She says, I'm going to do my best Joyce impression. She said, worry is down payment on a problem you may never even have. I know my impression wasn't good, but the quote was solid. Amen. We were watching a movie the other day. They said, on the movie, they said, most of the biggest challenges that you'll face in your life will be the result of things that never even crossed your worried mind. They will blindside you at 4:30 on a Thursday afternoon. You won't even have known that you needed to worry about them. Additionally, most of the things that we worry about create other problems that we didn't even know to worry about when we started worrying about the one that was never going to happen to begin with. Worry has babies. Worry creates all kinds of conflict that you were never going to have to face if you'd have turned it over to God in the first place. Far from solving your problems, it exponentially increases them. So I don't believe we should walk around in a state of worry, just playing out all of our worst case scenarios. But every once in a while, it's good to stare that fear in the face and say, well, what if, devil? What if he does? You know, my dad did not end up taking his own life, and we got to celebrate the end of his life with him, as painful as it was. We got to be there, and I thank God for that. But the gift of being able to go down to the bottom of that fear and saying, even if the worst thing happens, because sometimes it does. Sometimes it does. I know that's not the churchiest answer, but sometimes it does. When I announced the title of this message, many of you were excited. I said, it will happen. Wow! But what if it happened? The other it. I think it's a great gift when you find out, when you press down to the bottom of that and say, God would still be at the bottom. My faith is in God, not in the ship that I'm sailing on. What if? Stop. Well, what if? I remember telling Elijah one time, Elijah, if you keep jumping around like that, what if you break your bed? He said, well, what if? Here's what he knew. You give me another one. You ain't gonna let me sleep on the floor. That's a great phrase. Well, what if? It's not gonna happen, it's not gonna happen, it's not gonna happen, it's not gonna happen. But even if it does, it probably won't. But even if it does, God would be there at the bottom. He's the God of the valley too. And Paul said, and we might have to breaststroke our way to the island, but we're not dying out here. Put the verse back up. I think it's verse 22. The last line of that verse after the semicolon, he says, only the ship will be destroyed. Now, is that encouraging or discouraging? Depends on which part of the sentence you focus on. If you start with the ship will be destroyed, that's bad. But if you back up one word, only, what does that imply? The ship's going down, but boys, we're not.
Only one word stands between fear and faith. Only one word.
God, I'm preaching this now. Because when Jesus was buried in the ground, they thought it was over. So they got their boats back out and went fishing. Their faith was still in their boats. But when Jesus came walking to them on the water, he said, boys, get out your boat. I got up out of the ground. The worst thing happened. They spit on me and killed me and called me dead. But on the third day I rose. I'm counting on him. Oh. One time they wanted to kill Paul, Don. They wanted to kill him. And so he had this, that's so funny. He said, I'm a little bit torn. I'm a little bit conflicted. He said, part of me wants to live so I can tell more people about Christ. But there's this other part of me, I wouldn't mind seeing Jesus because I know it's going to be great. And so if I stay here, I'll just hang out with y'all and keep preaching. If I die, what are you going to do with a guy like this? The shipwreck don't scare a guy like this. He don't need the boat. Even if I drown, I don't really die. Even if I drown, I don't really die. You catching it? He came that I might have eternal life. Even if this ship goes down, my faith will stand. Fix your focus and keep up your courage. It says in verse 41, it happened just like Paul predicted. The ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. And so the pounding keeps coming, but now Paul's not focused on the pounding, he's focused on his purpose. He's not focused on the pounding, he's focused on God's promise. And it says in verse 42, I felt sorry for Paul when I read this. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners, Paul was one of them, to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. Thanks a lot for saving our lives by being on this ship and praying to God, Paul. Now we're going to kill you. But how many of you know that when the enemy has a plan to take you out, God has a plan to keep you in? Look at verse 42. It says, verse 43, the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept them. Do you know how many things God has already kept from happening in your life? Do you know how many times he stepped in and intervened that you don't know about? Do you know how many times you would have been in a car wreck if you didn't have to go back to the house and pick up that one thing that you forgot, and you didn't even see what would have happened at the stoplight when the guy who had been drinking? You're telling me you can't trust God now? He kept them. He kept them from carrying out their plan. And he ordered those who could swim to jump overboard and to get to land, and the rest were to get there on planks or on other pieces of the ship. See, you're going to make it, but it just might not be the way you imagined. It says, look at the next line. Don't you love studying the Bible? In this way, everyone reached land safely. Not the way they wanted to, not the most comfortable way, not the most convenient way. My faith isn't in how it will happen. My faith is in the God who said it would. I don't know how. I don't know when. We might have to grab a hold to a board and float in. Yeah, we're going to make it, though. I'm going to make it. I might lose my job. I'll get another one. No, it might be inconvenient. I might have to finish my degree later. I might not be able to finish it right now. I'll make it. And so our faith is all wrapped up in the way we want it to happen. And anytime it doesn't happen the way we planned it, looks like I'm not going to be able to retire now when I thought I would. Looks like I'm never going to get married now. I'm 17, I still don't have a man. I look like I'm never going to have. You know, dramatic people. But they got to the shore, and you can make it if your faith isn't in the boat. You can make it if your faith is in the right place. Now I'm concluding. If you want this little chapter 28 thing, make some noise real quick. I got one more thing to show you. You chose wisely, because this is good. See, Paul makes it through the shipwreck, makes it through the storm, survives the assassination attempt. And then chapter 28, verse 1, you're expecting like a victory party because it's the last chapter in the book of Acts. And so the islanders are all going to, open up some Corona party on the beach like you see on the commercials. You know what I'm saying? Like, find your beach. And it's prisoners, man. It's not like a Christian meeting. It's not a Christian cruise ship. Okay? So they're going to party a little bit. But that's not what happens. Look, once, verse 1, chapter 28, once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called Malta. And the islanders showed us unusual kindness, because when you get to the place where you're going that you didn't expect that you would ever end up, God will often have people there to do things for you that you couldn't have seen before you got there. So don't worry about who leaves you on the way, because God will always have somebody waiting in your future to help you accomplish what he's given you to do. They showed us unusual kindness, and they built a fire. They built a fire and welcomed us all because it was raining and cold. So now we got a fire going. Everything's good. And so we're roasting marshmallows, singing Kumbaya. Look, verse 3. Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it on the fire, a viper, driven out by the heat, fastened itself on his hand. Everybody say, poor Paul. This guy, the hits keep coming. He's already on trial. He's already a prisoner. He's been through a shipwreck. And now here comes the snake. He builds a fire, just trying to be helpful. And the heat from the fire drove out the snake. I did want to point out to you, as we round this corner into our final approach, that whenever you light a fire, you can expect some snakes to come out. So when your passion for God increases, and you start burning bright for the things of God, and you start trying to serve God, and you start trying to commit to God, don't be surprised when it brings out the snakes. Because the same fire that warmed them is the same fire that drove out the snake that wanted to kill him. So the fire brings out the snakes. And it says in verse 4, when the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, they said to each other, this man must be a murderer. For though he escaped from the sea, the goddess justice has not allowed him to live. I don't notice anybody in the passage trying to help Paul get the snake off his hand. They're having a committee meeting about why the snake. I think he got getting bit by a snake because he did something wrong. They're pontificating about his problem. Worst thing in the world. And remember how I told you Luke was the one writing the book of Acts? Luke was a medical doctor. And so I'm interested to see how he describes the snake bite. Look at verse 5. It's very succinct. It says, but Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. If I had time, and if I thought you could handle it, I would preach about shake the snake. If I thought you could handle it. Okay, just real quick then. Let's talk, before we finish, let's talk about shake the snake and feed the fire. Shake the snake. You got to learn how to shake the snake and feed the fire. See, Paul doesn't get bit by the snake and scream. He doesn't get bit by the snake and stand there in a state of shock. Paul looks at the snake and he says, oh, this too? And I'm asking myself, how did he have the presence of mind? Because I'm scared of snakes. How many of y'all scared of snakes? Okay, turn to the person next to you who doesn't have their hand up and say, how does it feel to be stupid? Snakes are scary. So if the snake bites me, I don't have the presence. But Paul, he knew something. He had something. He said, wait a minute. God didn't bring me through that shipwreck to let me die from this snake bite. So I know what to do. Now I'm using this as a metaphor. I'm saying that there are snakes that will attack your thinking. There are snakes that will attack your faith. Notice that God didn't let Paul step on the snake's head. That's how we want it. Show me the fear and I'll crush it. God says, no, gotta let it bite you. Because I gotta prove to everybody around you that I can let the fear bite you and even try to attach itself to you. But you know what to do when the snake starts biting. I want to teach you to shake that snake, shake that word, shake that trouble, shake that problem, shake that bad report, shake that test result, shake 3 people around you, say, shake that snake. Shake it. One more thing. I can't leave this alone. It said not only did he shake the snake, but he shook it back in the same fire that made it come out to begin with. Now I'm thinking about 2 Timothy 1, verses 6 and 7. Paul was preaching to Timothy when Timothy was under fire, and Timothy was facing some real hardship. And he said, Timothy, I want to remind you now, here it is, to fan into flames the spiritual gift God gave you when I laid my hands on you. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, shake it off, or timidity, shake it off. What are they going to think about me? Shake it off. What if it doesn't work out? God didn't give you a spirit of fear, but what? Of power and love and self-discipline. There's so much power in you that you can get bit and still not be stopped. That's when the people in your life will know there is a God. Shake it back into the same fire. Anytime you start pursuing God with a passion, don't be surprised when something slithers up to bite you. But if the shipwreck didn't kill you, if God brought you this far, the same God who got you to this point, if you'll just shake that thing off and don't let it stop you, it might bite you, but don't let it stop you. It might try to hurt you, but just don't let it stop you. Just shake it off. The hymn writer said, through many dangers, toils and snares, I have already come. 'Twas grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. Are you giving power to fear and anxiety in your mind today? You can't stop negative thoughts from coming, but you certainly can develop a plan for what to do when they show up.
Right.
If you just let them run wild in your head, they'll drag you down every single time. But I believe that God's word has practical instruction for what to do when anxiety attacks.
Yeah, that's what I need. I need a plan to deal with negative emotions instead of trying to ignore them. I think trying to ignore negative thoughts, personally, I feel like it actually makes them more powerful. The anxiety and the stress and the worry, it starts to build up. And then once again, they start to gain momentum in my mind, and it can be really hard to shut it down.
And then you convince yourself, I can't deal with this. It's too much. But you can deal with it. With God's help, you can. You're not the only one. Everyone who ever did anything for God, everyone who ever truly experienced his peace, learned how to deal with anxiety, with worry, with stress. And we want to help you. We've got some awesome tools for you today. We're going to teach you how to stand strong in the middle of whatever storm you're going through. You can learn to have a steady faith, not this up and down stuff, but something stable for when everything around you in your life is shaking. So I want you to go online right now or call the number on the screen. And when you do, you're going to ask to receive When Anxiety Attacks. That's what I want you to tell them. I want that series, When Anxiety Attacks. I want that message, and it'll be yours with your gift to the ministry today. This series has some of the best sermons that we have preached on the subject of anxiety and fear. And we've received so many letters from people about these messages that was the one. I was dealing with something that was taking me down. I didn't know what to do, and God's word spoke to me. We want to get these
these very same messages in your hands. So call today. Trust me when I say you are going to be a different person on the other side of anxiety. God is with you in this storm, and I want to get this resource in your hand. Here are some more details about today's offer.
Prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. You're underperforming. Your boss doesn't like you because you're not doing a very good job. You don't have what it takes. You are shaky at best. I am not enough. You're insane.
Run, because that's the only advice when you're faced with the roaring lion. The winds and the waves are roaring and raging, feeling all alone, freaking out. This is it. This is a time for resistance. He is a lion, and he might be licking his lips, and his fangs might be sharp, and he might have you in his sight, and you might have failed, and you might have done it, and you might be going down. But you need to know one thing about this lion. The lion is on a leash. He can only go so far. He can only do so much. He can't keep you down forever. This is it. Anxiety stops here. Depression stops here. Fear stops here. The name of Jesus is higher. You have all power in your hand.
Don't endure anxiety without a plan to deal with the attacks when they come. Receive your copy of When Anxiety Attacks today.
The toothless soldiers watched in vain. Was bothered for 3 days. His body there would not remain. Our God is robbed of grace. Our God is robbed of grace.
TBN Networks is sending the message of hope and grace to the world.
This is TBN in Africa. We're back, baby.
TBN in Africa is back. This network is redefining Christian television.
TBN South Africa is relaunching the vision.
TBN Africa, just one of many networks that is reaching the world with faith.
I want to say a few words about TBN. It is so crucial that we get the gospel to the world. Messiah said, the gospel shall be proclaimed to all the earth. This is the key. This is his great commission. The forefront is getting this to the nations, and TBN literally covers the globe with the gospel. I can bear witness when I have gone to other countries. I've been in England walking the streets, and people knew me there from one part to the other, and it was because of TBN. I saw how incredible the reach of this ministry is. It's incredible. And from the beginning, there has been an open door. When the Harbinger came out, TBN called up, said, we want this on there. This is prophetic. We want this thing to go forth. We are in the last days, and the most important thing we can do is do everything in our power that the world may hear the word of our Lord, Yeshua, Jesus, the Messiah.
Hello, I'm Jay Jones. Did you know that if you die without a will, the government decides what happens to your estate? That's why I urge you to make or review your will. And when you do, please consider making TBN a beneficiary. Your gift will create a living legacy that supports TBN's family of networks. For more information, send your letter of request to the address on your screen right today.
Stay tuned for Enjoy.